This is the, and I'm sure the good union folks did the work, so I won't, decry it anyway. But this is one of the more incredible lighting systems I've ever experienced. I can't see one of them. And yet I absolutely know that you're beautiful. And, well, some of you more than others, but it is a total pleasure to be here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I drove west this morning from Madison. It's always good to get out of Madison and into Wisconsin. But I had come back from Scotland. I spent all last week in Scotland, where they were having a referendum on whether to break away from Great Britain. And as a good American, I can never be too far from any effort to throw off the Queen or any other royal ruler who may impose unpleasant or undemocratic policies on place. And so, while Scotland did not choose to throw off its royal domination the other day, I do believe that the state of Wisconsin will, in November, decide to throw off the royalism of our country. And I believe that because I went west from Madison to La Crosse County, and as I entered into this county, I felt a great sense of relief and a great sense of comfort, because I like to be in visionary places. I like to be in places that are ahead of the curve. And anyone who remembers the election results from 2010 and 2012 knows that there were only 3 counties in the state of Wisconsin that in 2010 voted for Scott Walker, but in 2012 voted against him. Only 3 counties that went the right direction politically, sort of caught the wave, maybe a little ahead of the curve. One of those counties, Kenosha County down in the southeast. Another county, Columbia County, up in the middle of the state. But the county that made the big shift, the county that for governor in 2010 backed Scott Walker, but in 2012 rejected him. And I would suggest the county that is the beginning of the way was La Crosse County, Wisconsin, where we sit today. I want to talk to you about a couple of things that I think are very important. I hope I don't gloss over the fact that it is just simply a pleasure to be with the AFL-CIO. It is a pleasure to be with trade unionists, with people who actually understand and are committed to the ideal that when we organize collectively, we extend democracy so battered, so assaulted, so under assault currently by voter ID laws, by money and politics. We're going the wrong way in so many ways, but when we organize collectively in the workplace, we extend democracy into our factories, into our offices, into our communities, because trade unionism is about the growth of democracy. It is about giving people power in their own lives, not just a power to vote, but a power to have a say in how they work and what they do, and ultimately in the prosperity and the growth of their community, their state, and their nation. Trade unionism is the embodiment of everything that is good and hopeful about a civil society. I am glad to be here. But I do want to talk about our current politics, and I think it is important to understand where we're at. And where we're at is a very different place than if we had gathered 4 or 5 years ago. We all know that. Where we're at is a very different place than if we had gathered 2 years ago. And we should know that as well. Politics is not a static event. It doesn't stay the same. Things evolve. People learn. They grow. That's the thing that politicians don't understand. The most incredible thing about most of our politicians is they think people are always the same. They think that the lie of one campaign will work in the next campaign. But the reality is that when you lie to the people of a state, when you tell them that you will not attack their unions, when you tell them that you will not attack their public employees, when you tell them that you want to help to make that state work and that you want the economy to grow and be healthy, and then you adopt different policies, they may give you a little slack initially, but eventually the people wake up to the lie and they reject the liar. Let's see where we're at now, and I want to emphasize, as regards Scott Walker, who I've known for the better part of 30 years, good long time. As regards Scott Walker, I didn't know when he was coming up politically, I didn't know how little he knew about economics. It has been something of a revelation. Because it was my assumption, I mean, I've always told this by the media, that every Republican knows about economics. That they've got a good tie to Wall Street and to business and all these things, so they really know how it works. Well, I want to emphasize, Scott Walker, as our governor, and this is not about Democrat or Republican. It's very important to understand. This has nothing to do with Democrat versus Republican. Scott Walker, as our governor, has been an economic failure. He has been a worse failure than many other Republican governors. And the reason for that is that he has adopted economic policies that do not work. He has taken economic policies from Europe, austerity policies that have failed in country after country after country around the world, and amazingly enough, he brought them to Wisconsin. The thing to understand is, if Scott Walker had done nothing, if he had simply assumed the governorship and sat over at the governor's mansion and done nothing, Wisconsin would be in significantly better economic shape than what has happened since he took office. I don't say that casually. I love my state. I believe my state should always lead in the best of ways. But the simple reality is that if we had simply followed national trends, this state would be doing better today than it is. Now, why is that? What is it that Scott Walker did that actually stalled out and harmed Wisconsin when he could have just sat there and let it slide along? He decided to plagiarize ideas from around the world that had already failed. He decided to take ideas, whole parcel, didn't take like a little element here and a little element there. He took ideas that in other states and other countries had absolutely failed. He said, I'm going to make that the policy of Wisconsin. He did it via two routes. First route, the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. ALEC is an entity created by corporations because they just didn't think they were powerful enough. They didn't think they had enough control over things. So they created this organization, ALEC, so that they could influence the politics of every state in the country. They write so-called model legislation. And you know what their model legislation says? Unions are too strong, workers are paid too much, pensions are too big, health care is too available, democracy is too vibrant. So ALEC thinks everything has gotten just too good for the working people of this country. They want to move it back. When Scott Walker was in the legislature, he was a member of ALEC, an active member, big, strong supporter of it. As he came to his governorship, he took and supported, via the legislature, all sorts of ideas that came from this organization. He took whole pages of legislative proposals and made them the policies of the state of Wisconsin. The only problem is that those proposals, which work really well in the head of some elite think tank in New York City or Washington, D.C., have nothing to do with and cannot work in a state like Wisconsin. Scott Walker took policies that were designed in a theory, but never in a reality of economics. And then he kept on going. He kept on bringing these austerity ideas to this state. And what does that mean? You attack unions. Because you don't want anyone in the public or the private sector who can stand up and say, hey, this isn't working. You make workers afraid to call out their bosses when their bosses are failing to do the right job. And so you don't just weaken unions as entities, you weaken your early warning systems that tell you that economic policies aren't working. That's what happened in this state. Second thing that happened was, after you attack the unions, you attack